So now let's proceed ahead with our code right here. So in here we have checked if the cart exists, and if the cart does not exist, we have created this particular JSON object right over here. However, one more thing which I would like to mention here is that this particular cart which we are mentioning over here is nothing but the cart in our local storage. And this variable right here which we are creating as cart is nothing but this is actually a JavaScript object which we have created inside our code right here. So always make sure that you do get a difference between this cart and this cart right here. This cart is actually the cart from the local storage, and this cart is actually the cart which we will be using in our JavaScript code. So now, how exactly do we go ahead and make sure that the values inside this and this are actually the same? So for the same purpose, we go ahead and get the actual values from the cart and store those values up in this particular cart variable. So how can we do that? We can do that by typing in else. So if the local storage dot get item cart is not equal to null, means that there is some value in this particular cart which is the local storage cart. So now we want to get that value and we want to store that thing up over here. So how can we do that? We can simply go ahead and type in cart equals, and I can say something like local storage dot get item to get that particular item which is nothing but the cart. Now it looks easy enough over here, and this might make us think that the local storage cart is actually stored in this particular cart right here. But even before you do so, you first need to go ahead and pass that particular JSON object in here. So what I exactly mean by passing? So passing over here means nothing but actually converting it into a suitable format. So in order to do that, instead of writing a whole bunch of this code right here, I'll just go ahead and just cut it for now, not delete it. And here I can say something like JSON.pass, and pass is actually a function, and in there I actually need to go ahead and make or mention a valid JSON string. So I can simply paste this over here, and once I do that, now we get the actual cart which is the local storage's cart stored into our cart variable right here which we have just created right now, and that actually completes the cart creation logic in here. So now let's move ahead and learn about handling the button click of this add to cart button. So now in JavaScript we have something which is called as the document object model. And according to the document object model, what we can do is that we get access to this entire HTML document. So that means if you actually go ahead and again click on inspect, as you can see we have a bunch of HTML code in here. And this particular HTML code is nothing but our entire HTML document which actually defines this particular web page. Now with JavaScript, we now have access to all of this HTML document because of the JavaScript's document object model. And using the same document object model, we can actually go ahead access any of these elements in our JavaScript code. So how exactly can we go ahead and do that? So let's go ahead and learn how to do that. So let's hop back to our code in here, and now we actually want to get access to the button which is nothing but the add to cart button, which is this button right here. So in order to get access to a specific button, you actually need to use its class. So if you go ahead and click on inspect over here, as you can see we have this class for this button as btn and btn warning. But let's go ahead and add another class to this button so that we can uniquely identify the add to cart button. So let's go back to our index.html, and in here let's actually go to the add to cart button. So I'll simply search for add to cart, and this is our button right here, and let's add another class called as etc to this particular button. And let's also do one thing, let's actually replace this a with actual button. And once we go ahead and do that, we can now pretty much go ahead and access this button using JavaScript document object model using its class. So let's learn how exactly can we do that. So we go ahead, go right here, And in order to access the document, first of all, I'll type in $, and then I'll type in document, then I'll type in .on, which means that we can perform any action on this document. So in here, we actually want to capture the action, which is a click. So whenever something is clicked, then we give a comma, and then we mention what kind of button do we want to handle the click. So we actually want to handle the click related to the button, which is nothing but add to cart. So in order to refer to that particular button, we go ahead and make use of the class which we have just added. So we have added the ATC class to that particular button. So we'll mention ATC over here. And whenever you are mentioning a class over here, you always need to make sure that you have a dot before the class name. So this means that on the document, we are actually handling the event, which is the click event, and we are handling it for a button whose class is ATC. And now we want to mention that whenever that button is actually clicked, we want to perform an action. And the action in this case is nothing but we want to execute a bunch of code in here. So in order to execute a bunch of code, we again give a comma and type in a function, and we write in that bunch of code in this particular function right here. So this is the syntax for actually creating a function in JavaScript. So you type in function, then you have parentheses, and then you have opening and closing curly brackets right over here. Now in this particular thing, I can write in any bunch of code which I want. So in order to write in some code in here, for testing purposes, I'll simply say console.log, and I'll say something like the add to cart button is clicked. So once we go ahead and do that, we are pretty much good to go. So now I can go ahead and I can simply save this code, and if we go to console and if we hit refresh, and if I click on this thing, as you can see, it says the add to cart button is clicked. So when I click once more, as you can see, again this line is printed up over here to the console. So if I do this with any button right over here, I'll get that the add to cart button is clicked. So which means that we have successfully handled the click associated with the add to cart button, but we yet don't know which button is being clicked. So for example, if I click on this button, it will still say the add to cart button is clicked. If I click this, it will say the same thing, but we actually want to identify the ID associated with that particular button. So for example, when I click on the add to cart of this particular button, I should get the ID as the item ID for this particular laptop. And when I click on the add to cart button for this watch, I should actually get the ID of this particular watch and not this laptop right here. So how exactly can we go ahead and implement that logic over here? So we'll go ahead and learn about that in the upcoming lecture. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.